Hello and welcome back to the Dev Made Easy step-by-step tutorial series. Today we will be going over saved data, and this will allow the user to seamlessly switch between their various Android devices. It is also an upcoming requirement for the Google Play Level Up program, which will give your application bonus exposure. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. If you are picking up right from this video, you may be missing the plugin configuration, so make sure you go watch one of the previous tutorials to get your plugin working, and make sure that your configuration has saved games enabled on the Google Play console. Okay, let's hop right into Godot. Okay, and just a super quick reminder of where our application is at. We have a level select screen and a game screen. So when you click the level, and we just have a button right now that completes the level, we'll be adding the puzzle to it later, and it hops back to the main screen. So our goal today is to implement saved player data, store their completed levels, and also have the UI react dynamically to the data that we have stored in the cloud. So first goal today is let's go ahead and make the interface that we'll be connecting the saved data to. So we just need to start with a new scene, and we'll call it player data, and we need to attach one child node, and this will be the PlayGamesSnapshot client. So this is what you'll be missing if you haven't already configured the plugin I'm suggesting for this functionality. Link will be in the description if you want to just go through that documentation, and link to the video on how to configure the plugin will also be in the description. So hop over there when you're ready, hop back here, and it'll make save data super easy and super seamless. Okay, so in your player data, go ahead and let's attach a new script called PlayerData.gd, and let's get started to work on this script. So what we're going to want to do is we want to just basically make the interface for interacting with player data go through this script. So let's go ahead and save here our new player data scene. And let's start to get working on the functionality. So this is in the plugins documentation, but basically we want to have a snapshot client of PlayGamesSnapshot client, and we want to set this to the node PlayGamesSnapshot client here in the scene. Do not instantiate the class with a new. Doing it like this, it will not work. We need to actually have this in a scene and go ahead and connect it exactly like this. In addition to this, we also know we're going to have a member variable of this node called current data, and for now it will just be a string value, and we'll also want a signal to emit when the data is actually loaded. So first off, let's go ahead and now get writing some of the functions. So let's go ahead and write a getter and a setter. Well, the set data function obviously only needs one member, and that's going to take in the data, and it's just going to set current data to be data. And obviously, that's right, a getter is not going to take any parameters, and it's just going to return the current data. Okay, so now we have an interface to get and set the data, but now we also want a little bit of a function to save the data and to load the data. Let's get started on the load data function. The most important feature that we need to develop here is snapshot client, and we just have to call load game. I'm going to call my data package fluzzle data because that's what I am going to save it as later. And additionally to this, we want to attach the game loaded signal to a function, maybe called game data ready. So this is, remember to connect the signal before we load the game. And this is going to go ahead and connect the signal that when the game data is ready to be loaded, it has been loaded completely, then it's going to call game data ready. And in here, we'll want to emit the signal data loaded. And we're going to listen to this signal in the parent scene where we're calling load data, and then we'll know that in the parent scene, the game data is ready to be loaded as well. Now, every time we call load data, we don't actually want to connect the signal. So let's go ahead and move this connection up here in the ready function. And this will assure that the game loaded function signal is only connected to the function once, so we're not getting this multiple connection sort of situation going on. Okay, so now we need a save data interface, a save data function to interface with our backend data, and the data to save is just going to be a stringified JSON of our current data, and you want to save the client data to the cloud using this one simple function again, save game. Give it a name, the same name that we're using to load the data, so in this case Fluzzle data, and just give it a description. So this is player data for the app Fluzzle. And you want to follow this here exactly to UTF-8 buffer. So if your current data is a string and you're JSON stringifying your data to save, this is the proper function to call when you're calling save game. And so this is going to actually send the data to the cloud in the player's current logged in player's account. That's all we need for our player data interface. Let's go ahead now and make sure that this is a global in our function. So go ahead and make sure that you're connecting your player data scene, not just the script, and click OK. And we'll call the node name player data and make sure that here is now enabled in player data. So now we can access player data from anywhere else that we wish. So coming over to our level select screen, let's get working on how the UI is going to interact with the player's data. So we have to first have a couple extra functions here. So let's make a new signal in this scene called signal data has loaded. In the enter tree function, we want to call data has loaded dot connect this to a data loaded function. Now this function currently doesn't exist, so once again, let's just go ahead and make that function. We'll make it right here, easy peasy. Data loaded. Let's do a little print. Data has been loaded, and we want to populate the level screen. So right now we're just calling populate level screen from within the ready function, but we know that this UI here, the amount of levels completed or the levels available to complete, or maybe we'll apply a tint to the levels that have already been completed or levels that aren't available based off the player's data. So we can't actually populate the level screen until we have the player's data loaded. So let's go ahead and remove that function from the ready call and make sure that we're only populating the level screen once the data has actually loaded. So in the Android authentication function, we know that we have two use cases. So there's the use case where the plugin is not found and where the plugin is found. So this else case is going to run when we are connected to the real device, and this is going to pull the player's data from the cloud. Now this is the case where we're testing on our local device. So now since we moved out that populate level screen function, we can see that our levels now, our level selections are no longer loading. So we need to code some dummy data so that we can test this feature locally, as opposed to having to export to our phone to test how the data interacts with our front end. So in the plugin not found, let's go ahead and make a dummy data. And this is where we can kind of decide what the player's data structure, player data structure is going to look like. For now, I just want to keep a simple array of the levels that the player has completed, and that's about it. So let's go ahead and make sure that now we make the dummy data into the type of object that we are expecting in the player data, and we'll go ahead and start calling our player data interface. So let's stringify the dummy data. And then we'll parse the dummy data to make sure it's a proper JSON object. And then we can just use our player data.setData and pass in the JSON parsed value and emit a signal manually here that the data has loaded. just a small typo. Okay, so you see in this case, we're not setting PlayerData.save data because we know that the save data function is going to save the game to the cloud. And this is only going to work if we actually have a logged in player on the Google Play services. So we're just going to call set data and then manually trigger the data has loaded function. So now when we go ahead and load, we should see that now the levels are being populated. So now we want to update our function that populates the level screen to actually interact with the player data. So coming down here to the populate level screen, we're going to need to start working on this. So inside the populate level screen, let's first grab the player's data. So we can say current data is going to be player data.getData. So we're going to use that getter call that we made, and we can say levels completed is going to be current data, and we can just interface with the player's stored data like this, levels completed. And let's go ahead and print out our levels completed just so we can see what this looks like. And in the background there, we see our empty array is getting printed. And now let's go ahead and add some data here. So let's say the player has completed levels 1 and completed levels 2. And let's go ahead and see what this is logging. So we do see here now that it's printing floats 1.0 and 2.0, but we're entering in 1. So this is just a godot side effect here when we're parsing the data and then stringifying it. So that's going to be an issue when we want to compare it to this I value because we know that that's an integer. So let's go ahead and write a function that will map these float values to an integer value. And it's as easy as this, just that one line change. So now when we go ahead and launch our application, we can see that our player data is now back in the integer form. So we can easily compare it to this I value to modify what the level button looks like based off if the player's level is completed or not. Okay, so let's start with a default is level completed. We're going to say is false. Now, if I plus 1 is in levels completed, then we can say is level completed is going to be true. And so we're doing I plus 1 here because we're also doing I plus 1 here. And that's because the first level, we're showing the user's level 1. But on the back end of this array, obviously it's starting at index 0. And, you know, normal people don't start counting from 0. But us as programmers, we know we're counting as 0. So just to keep the displayed value human readable, we're starting at level 1. But we know the index of the actual value is 0. So now let's make sure that the level button looks different if the level's actually been completed. So let's go ahead and write that now. So before we add the child, let's check is if the level is completed. And then we want to say level button to add dot modulate, and we're just going to give it a little modulation here. What I'll just do is just set it to some value like 0.4. And that's going to be like some sort of gray, but we know we're going for like a completed kind of vibe. And so maybe I'll make it like a bright green and just put in those values there just to make the color picker pop up. So it's just a little bit easier to choose our color. Okay, so now that we've got our checking to see that if the level is completed, and then we're modulating the color value if the level is completed. When we go launch here in our dummy data, we've got levels 1 and 2 completed. So now that when we go launch, we can see that now we're effectively tinting the first 2 levels. So let's test some edge cases here. What if I've completed level 1 and 3? We should see levels button 1 and 3 highlighted perfect. And what if, we've only completed level 1? Well, we will see only the level 1 button has been highlighted. Okay, perfect. So now that the front end of our UI is correctly interacting with our back end data, we know that we have successfully, plugged in our UI to work with this data dynamically. But we haven't coded the case where there is a player's data saved in the cloud that we actually need to pull down when we're logged in on a real device. So let's go ahead and program that case now. So in the PlayGames signing client, you're going to want to make sure that you connect your user authenticated function. And we know that we can't grab the player's data until the player's actually been authenticated. So once the player's authenticated, let's go ahead and start interfacing with our player data code. And we'll need to attach a few listeners here in this scene. So let's go ahead and attach the PlayerData.dataLoaded function to our data loaded function here in the level select screen. We also want to make sure that we attach the PlayerData snapshot client. We want to maybe know when the game saved signal has been executed. So let's go ahead and write a nice little utility for that and add in the mandatory parameters. And you'll see here the save data name. In our case, that will be Fluzzle data. In saved, this is saved. This will be yes or no if the data was successfully saved. And that description there will be, in our case, again, the save data for the Fluzzle app. And we can just maybe print save data saved for now. Okay, so in addition to this, don't forget to also attach the snapshot client game loaded function. And we can attach that to the onGameLoaded call here in the level select screen. And this is a function that doesn't exist yet. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. And if is authenticated, so if the player is actually authenticated, what we need to do now is actually load the data. So we can connect the signals outside of the is authenticated call, but we can only actually call the cloud for the player's data after we've been authenticated. So that's why this PlayerData.load data call is inside of the is authenticated when this is actually returning a true value. So let's go ahead now and write the onGameLoaded function. I'll hop up here and I'll say onGameLoaded, and this is going to take a snapshot, PlayGamesSnapshot. So this is being called when the player's data has been loaded, and the player's data has been loaded when we're already authenticated. So we are authenticated and the game data is ready. So we have the player's snapshot is what it's called. So we can say the game data has been loaded just for debugging purposes if anything goes wrong. And now we need to react to the snapshot. So if the snapshot content is empty, or the snapshot content is empty in this case, or of size 0, then we know we're a brand new player. So let's go ahead and, similar to how we made the dummy data, we need to make a similar empty array of levels completed for the new player case. In the new player case, we want to set the data to the current data, but we also want to save the data. So since we are authenticated, we're dealing with a real user here. Not only do we want to set the player's current data, we also want to save it and push it to the cloud. And I can just manually call the data loaded function, and remember that this will populate the level screen now that we know that the data has been loaded. When we're calling here, when this function's called, since it's connected to the game loaded script, the player's data is already ready to go. So I don't need to connect another signal here and wait for the callback. I can just call the data loaded function because we've already set the player's data, and we know that we'll need the player's data here when we build the populate the level screen. Our player data is already loaded and good to go. So else we're in the existing player case. So in the existing player case, it's even easier. So we can just call data to load, and we can get the snapshot's content. And obviously, the reason why we're saying if it's size 0 or it's empty, there's no content to grab if they're a brand new player, and we haven't saved anything. So remember, in the same way that we saved the data to a UTF-8 string, that's what we're going to grab as well. And then you just need to make sure that you use JSON to parse this data. So we're gonna use JSON parse string data to load. And in this case, all you have to do is just set the player's data because we don't need to save any data in this case. Remember, we're loading the game data. We've already pulled it from the cloud, and so now we're reading the snapshot's content, and just go ahead and set that to the current player's data. And again, here we'll want to manually call that the data has been loaded so that we can go ahead and populate those level select buttons. Okay, so now we also want the player's data to be updated when they complete the level. So right now we've got our game loop here. We have the level select screen, and let's say the player loads level 2, and they go ahead and complete the level. Well, when they come back to the main screen, we want to make sure that level 2 is now set as completed. So let's go ahead and code that in. So on button press, so this is the function that's being called here. When we complete the level, of course, this will be triggered at a later date, when the actual logic of the puzzle is completed. But for now, just to get the the back end of our application working, we want to then set this level completed in the player's backing array. So let's grab the player's current data, and then we can say we can go current data at levels completed, and we can push back. We can say int current level. We know we have the current level data member. It's a string, and so we want to add this to the player's array. And when we go load, and then we come back here to select a level and complete the level, well, turns out we're not actually, this feature is not totally finished yet. So checking this out here, in the case of no plugin found here, when we are in the ready script, since we are loading this screen here again, changing the scene to file, this function is actually being run again. And so in the case of the plugin not being found, we're resetting the dummy data. Let's write a new data member for this. We could say var has data, and it will start as a false. PlayerData dot has data, and we'll say if not PlayerData has data, and whenever we set data, we'll say has data to be true. Okay, so we fixed that crash here. Now when we load into level 2 and complete the level and hop back in, now our data is completed. So don't forget, now let's hop back to the level to the game screen. This is good for the local case, but we also want to save the data in the real user case where we're on the Android phone. So go player data dot set data, set it back to the current data, and we want to call save data. And so this will actually push the current data to the cloud attached to this this player's logged in account. Okay, so functionality is all working, and we can test that using our dummy data on the local no plugin found use case. Let's go ahead and export the game and test on a real device logged into Google Play Services. Okay, so our function for saving the data after we complete the level here, it's not working on the real Android device, despite it working on the emulator. And here's why. So you see that when I close the app and reopen it, the level's been updated. So we know the back end data is being updated correctly, but the front end isn't being updated correctly. And that's because here in the level select screen on the emulator, we're checking to see if not player has data, and in that case we're going ahead and setting the data right away and loading the level select screen. But on the Android device, here in game screen, we're setting data and saving data, but on the level select screen here, we're not drawing the buttons until the player's data here gets called back from the cloud. And so we're using stale data to redraw the UI. So we need a extra case here that checks to see if the player's data has already been set and we have like a live transaction going on, and update the front end using the current data not the stale data that was initially in the cloud. So let's go ahead and fix that feature. And so in a similar way, if we have data, we've set the data in this instance of the client being loaded. So we can say here if not player data dot has data, or sorry, if in this case we want if the player has data, we can just go ahead and call the we've already been authenticated. So if the player has data, we know that we've already been authenticated. So we can just we can just emit the signal right away that the data has loaded, and this will use the most updated current data that's in the player data object. And whenever that hits the cloud later, that saved data, if it's finished, it's fine. We can basically just ignore it. We know that it's being handled on the back end. And so otherwise, if the player data does not have a current data set, then we'll need to wait for the authentication to go through and load the data from there. So I think this change is all we needed. So let's go ahead and make another release and test it out. Okay, go ahead and check to see that your update has hit again, and hit the update, and we'll see now if our little if statement has fixed the issue with the front end. Open. Okay, so now when we load into level 1 here and complete the level and come back, it's already set to green. Okay, good. So that is saved data complete. So we've got multiple scenes, we've got achievements, we've got ads, we've got saved data. Our users can now switch between their various Android devices seamlessly. That is a requirement for the Level Up program, and so we're all good, and we're off to the races. Thanks for watching. Follow the tutorial for more.